I'm your host, Arden Moore. I'm yapping with Dr. Ernie Ward, and he has teamed up with Base Paws, and they are talking about some interesting scenarios. And I know you are a major advocate of Mother Earth and dogs and cats, and I guess you like people too. So let's flip the scenario. We're in a new ice age. What happens? How are dogs going to adapt?
Yeah. And, I know all the talk is about a hot planet, but it wasn't that long ago that scientists were speculating we could be entering into a new ice age. So, these are, again, the climate is very complex. And so, we're looking at lots of different scenarios. So what happens in the future if suddenly everything is frostbitten, right? If suddenly, we've got icicles hanging from our dens at dinner time, we have to sit around a big fire to keep warm. And so, again, as we mentioned with climate change in a hot environment, we also realize that people are going to breed and select dog traits that are beneficial in a colder climate. And so this really kind of goes into some of the common sense things you'd think about. I do want to talk about the physiological changes that we speculate. But number one, we're going to see thicker fur coats, right? So more dense coats. Just imagine, a dog needing to protect itself. They need their own fur coat to insulate against that. So that's going to be one thing that we would definitely see: longer, thicker fur coats, just like you would associate today. Also,
I gotta step in here. All the Bernese Mountain Dogs listening right now are going, yeah, Dr. Ernie,
we told you. That's right. Even though they're in North Carolina or South Carolina, we're preparing for the future. The other thing too is going to be body fat, right? Because that is the biggest insulator we have against the cold. And honestly, as humans migrated north in northern latitudes, thousands and thousands of years ago, we also saw people get larger, as we mentioned in the last segment. And so one of the things they did was store more body fat. And that wasn't just for energy, but also for insulation. So I expect to see larger dogs with more body fat, especially, when we look at where the body fat is distributed. And there's two different types. And those of you that have followed me in my fight against obesity all these years know I talk about the two different types of fats. And the one fat we talk about so often, which is the more harmful fat, is the white fat. Okay, so this is the belly fat, if you will. People, when they think of harmful effects, we think that. But remember, there's another type of fat that we all have as mammals called brown fat, which actually is physiologically active in different ways. Okay, it's a better source of energy whenever we need to store it up. But more importantly, it's also a better insulator. And so this is why you tend to see brown fat in animals stored along their backs, okay, and their sides. So I think you'll probably see physiologically an adaptation there to go towards more brown fat, again, for energy and insulation. We also expect to see things, again, like these are dogs that may have to scavenge more, right? So they may be, in a cold climate having to go and hunt. And so I do expect them to be a little more wolf-like, or we wind up breeding, as we did with climate change in the warm environment, to make smaller dogs to be able to keep inside, to keep warm and so forth. But
Chihuahuas are not really happy about this scenario, right?
Oh, yeah. No. But long-haired Dachshunds say, hey, we told you so. That's right. So everybody likes
fun.
It is fun. And so what we did too is we took a lot of these different morphological or body shape and characteristics, and we put them into an AI generator. And we said, okay, here's what Dr. Ward is saying, and here's what some of our geneticists are saying. What would this look like? And so that was really a fun part of it. So there are some sophisticated AI image generators out there. So you take in and you say, what would this look like over the next 10,000 years? And I hope everybody that's listening can go check out those images, because they're at first, they're comical. I'll be the first to admit, they're kind of like, oh, okay. But then you start to realize, wow, this could actually happen. I get where they're going with this stuff. But again, I think as with hot climates, Arden, the bigger changes are going to be underneath the fur, the physiological adaptations, how we burn, fat, how we store energy, what processes for proteins and minerals and so forth. I think really for me, I always go back to nutrition and how do we survive physiologically. And I think that, again, we're going to conserve water. We're going to have to do more with less food or calories, and we're going to need to store that in a way that actually benefits us from a heat standpoint.
And we may have to go to Mars.
Yep, that was actually the most fun. And I'll tell you, Arden, in my last book, The Clean Pet Food Revolution, I actually talked about this, Because right now, and several years ago, I was invited to talk to a group of folks who were talking about space colonization. And at that time, they were really looking more towards the International Space Station and so forth, and further colonization maybe on the moon and Mars. And as I was talking to these folks, it was glaringly obvious that they had omitted any type of companion animal. Now, life on another planet, life in space without any animal compatriot, I think is missing the human element. Like, I think that's not even the human existence. And I made this argument. I said, I don't think that humans, we didn't evolve in the absence of all other animal life. So I think you're taking a big part of humanity away if you don't, kind of try to incorporate animals into space. And so one of the things we did look at was what would that look like? And again, this is something that myself, Stephen Kotler, and others, we've been brainstorming around this for a while, because we really are encouraging folks, if you're listening and you're involved with some of the Mars colonization, remember, I mean, I'm that guy who's
don't
been
forget
about it for
who
years.
let the dogs out in Mars.
Right. But I think it's just an important part of being a human being.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, and so we started looking at what would that look like. They have to be small dogs, right? Because on space, you've got a couple of things, but the key element that we have to conserve is oxygen. So you've got to have a dog, or a cat. And look, I'll say I'll take any mammal. In fact, we did talk about, like gerbils and hamsters and small mammals, right? Because I think that humans just need something else other than a plant or a fungi to take care of in space.
This is where the Chihuahuas are now back to loving you.
They are back, yeah. Oh, man, any of the toy breeds are probably listening right now a little more attentively. And so, we do know that small to conserve oxygen. I do think that there are some ways physiologically to adapt them to low oxygen environments. And so I think that we can actually enhance that for sure. And this has to do with red blood cells, of course, so density of red blood cells, numbers, per liter. So I think that there's some ways that we could even, sort of quickly adapt dogs to do better in a lower oxygen environment, to conserve oxygen for humans, of course, and plants, because we gotta eat up there. And so I think that we would do that small. They would have probably less hair than now. And this is really, one of the things that we were brainstorming early on was this is probably just a hygienic issue, right? I mean, because if you've got fur flying on a space station or in a enclosed colonization on Mars, then that's going to maybe plug up air purifiers. And so we realized that we need things that don't shed a lot, So early on, we recognized that could be a thing. Also, we talked about hypoallergenicity, right? And while you can't truly design a hypoallergenic dog, although I think with some of the genetic interventions that are coming, we may be able to. But I think that's something we've got to consider, because, again, people in a very enclosed space sharing recycled air, we don't want to also recycle any allergens that could then cause a problem for humans. So I think all these things really come into play. The other thing that really, we didn't talk about so much in this thing, but something that my friends and I have talked about is how do we reclaim waste more efficiently, right? Because so dogs that urinate and defecate, how can we and so I think there are ways to transfer that into energy, into, nutrients for example, for the plants that maybe we're growing, or the fungi that we're growing up there in space. So again, being very smart about it. But I'll say too, to the listeners, the main point I want to make is that when we talk about colonization of space for humans, let's not forget the important role that animals have played in getting us to where we are today. I do not believe that humanity, I know we wouldn't be where we are today without animals, right? And so I know that a lot of my colleagues say, oh, but Ernie, we've transcended that.
No.
I think it's a humanity, right? I do think there's difference, and I don't think that we can find this in an AI computer simulation. I think that if humans are going to colonize space, I want it to be, I'd love to see a dog by my side.
And speaking of that, who's the dog by your side these days?
It's still border terriers. We kind of got into those. We have a border terrier rescue now, Jenny, and she has a little physical issue, but she does really, really well. And, so I'm a big fan of border terriers, small dogs. So, hey, we're preparing for climate change here on the coast of North Carolina already. So,
my terrier mix, Kona, is loving you even more now, because she's like, terriers rock. Yeah. Terriers rock.
They do. And, and we describe border terriers as a plucky breed. And so if you know, you know.
Breed.
But I'll also,
smart.
I think the temperament, when we do look in the future, I mean, the temperament is going to be really essential, right? Because we've got to have dogs that really can, coexist with us, maybe in some challenging times.
Wow. You've got to admit, this has been a fascinating dive into what could be in 10,000 years. None of us will be around right now to prove it or disprove it, but it really does work your brain muscles too, doesn't it? In a different way.
It really does. And again, we didn't even touch on what if we could manipulate the DNA, right? Because I think that actually a lot of cool stuff could happen that way as far as preventing disease, enhancing physiological mechanisms and systems. So, I mean, there's a lot more that could be done, but, let's just kind of look at it in current day lens and kind of move forward. But if you get a chance, check out some of those images because I think they're quite fascinating.
Now, there's two places I want people to dash off to. Let's go to Dr. Ernie Ward, correct.com.
That's right. Dr. Ernie Ward.
And basepaws.com. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Oh, my gosh. Any parting message? We just got a couple of minutes that you want to say to all the people out there, because you are the man that is trying to keep our pets from getting too fat and trying to save our planet, looking at plant-based proteins. I mean, what a mission you have carved out for yourself.
Well, I'm optimistic. I'm one of those people that continues to see the glass half full. I know there's a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I see a bright future 10,000 years into the future, whether it's hot or cold or on Mars. I think that it's going to be really fulfilling, and I hope to see our companions next to us.
And I hope that they deliver pizza. That's just my humble wish.
I'm with you on that. I am with you on that.
Thanks so much for making our tails wag by watching this guest interview from Arden Moore's Four-Legged Life. Four-Legged Life. Make sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of our Four-Legged Life content. Four-Legged Life. Four-Legged Life.